let me just tell you a few numbers. Like for the last month, UPI cleared 14.4 billion in number of transactions, and it was for the value of US dollar 245 billion. It's really an inclusive system with more and more features being added, more and more user base getting on it. You also did mention about the interlinking expectations and the possibilities as well. Just was curious, could there be any timeline where we can see UPI and FedNow getting linked, and what could be the motives that we can, or motivations that we can look at for such a linkage?
Yeah, so that's what I was saying. Right now, we just don't have enough banks connected to make it a full service product. Now, we do have a private sector real-time payments, which is another thing that UPI should be looking to connect to, not just FedNow. That's up and running, but it doesn't have quite the same number of banks, but it has all the largest banks. We have a lot of the large banks, but not necessarily all of them on the FedNow network. So the whole value chain is when like with UPI, all the banks are connected. And when they're all connected, you can move a payment from one bank or another person easy. But if those banks aren't connected, the payment goes nowhere. And so the value proposition just isn't quite there yet. So that's why what I try to convey to everybody is the Federal Reserve is fully behind the global, faster, cheaper payments and connecting these things. But until you have a functioning domestic payment network, there's no value proposition in connecting. It's just not going to do anything. So that's the critical thing I try to stress. You just have to give us time to get ours up and running. There is the real-time payment system in the private sector in the U.S., but again, you're not going to get the ubiquitous reach because they only have about 600 banks attached to that one. So it's just going to take time because of our unique situation with 9,000 depository institutions. I often view creating FedNow as a solution to a large market failure in the sense that we could not get 8,900 banks to coordinate and build their own system. It's just a market failure problem. So we started building the FedNow system, and we finally launched it last year, and we have about 1,000 banks that have now signed up. But as I said, there's roughly 9,000 banks. This is a long process to get all of these banks hooked up. So if UPI would somehow connect to FedNow and you want to send a payment from the US to India or vice versa, most of the banks in the US are not connected. The payment's going to go nowhere. So that's what I mean. We have to take time to build out our network before we seriously think that it's going to be of value to every other fast payment network in the US. And that'll just take some time.